A priest, a thief, and an engineer were all waiting in line to be executed by guillotine during the French Revolution. The priest was the first to meet his fate. As he stepped onto the platform, the executioner asked, "Father, would you like to meet your maker face up or face down?" After a moment of thought, the priest replied, "My son, if today is to be my last, then I wish to go face up, so I may look toward the heavens and the Almighty as I take my last breath." The executioner agreed and placed the priest on his back in the guillotine. The executioner slowly raised the blade, dripping with the blood of countless previous victims. With the blade at its maximum height, it came crashing down, but at the last moment it stopped just above the priest's neck, sparing his life. The crowd gasped in awe, and the executioner, believing it to be a divine intervention, released the priest and sent him off to freedom. Next, the thief was brought forward and asked the same question. Seeing the priest's miraculous escape, the thief thought, "Well, I've got nothing to lose." So he also chose to face up. The executioner raised the blade, and once again it plummeted down, only to stop just above the thief's neck. Shocked, the executioner assumed this too was a message from above and freed the thief. Finally, it was the engineer's turn. The executioner offered the same choice: face up or face down. The engineer, after watching the previous two cases, smirked and said, "Well, given what I've seen, I'm going to go with face up too." The executioner placed him in the guillotine, locked the lunette around his neck, and raised the blade to its maximum position. At that moment, the engineer shouted, "Hang on a sec, I think I see the problem." A man wakes up and finds himself alone in a hospital room. He has no recollection of how he got there. While pondering his situation, his bedside phone rings, and he answers it. A doctor on the other end identifies himself and tells the man, "I have really bad news. You're very sick. After your collapse yesterday, we ordered several tests and got the results back this morning. I'm afraid you have avian flu, Ebola, and you've tested positive for HIV, hepatitis, and COVID." Stunned, the man asks, "Well, what's next? What are you going to do?" "The doc, for starters, we're putting you on a strict diet of only pizza." The patient asks, "Will that really help me, doctor?" "No," the doc responds, "but it's all we can fit under the door." An older woman, well past childbearing years, went to a walk-in clinic where she was seen by a young new doctor. After about 3 minutes in the exam room, the doctor told her she was pregnant. She burst out the door, screaming as she ran down the hall. An older doctor stopped her and asked her what the problem was, and she told him what had happened. After hearing her out, he sat her down in another exam room and marched back to where the first doctor was and demanded, "What is the matter with you? That lady is over 60 years old and has 4 grown children and several grandchildren, and you told her she was pregnant." The young doctor continued to write on his clipboard, and without looking up he asked, "Does she still have the hiccups?" A French, a German, and an Italian spy are captured one day. The captors grab the French spy, take him to the next room, and tie his hands behind a chair. They then proceed to torture him for 2 hours before he finally cracks, answers all questions, and gives up all of his secrets. The captors then grab the German spy. They tie his hands behind the chair in the next room too and torture him for 4 hours before he finally cracks and tells them what they want to know. They then grab the Italian spy. Once again, they tie his hands behind the chair and begin torturing him. 4 hours go by and the spy isn't talking. Then 8 hours, then 16, and after 24 hours they give up and throw him back into the cell. The German and French spies are impressed and ask him how he managed to not talk. The Italian spy says, "I wanted to, but I couldn't move my hands." While teaching a class, a teacher trying to teach good manners asked her students the following question. "Michael, if you were on a date having dinner with a nice young lady, how would you tell her that you have to go to the bathroom?" Michael said, "Just a minute. I have to go pee." The teacher responded by saying, "That would be rude and impolite. What about you, Sherman? How would you say it?" Sherman said, "I'm sorry, but I really need to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back." "That's better, but it's still not very nice to say the word bathroom at the dinner table. And you, little Johnny, can you use your brain for once and show us your good manners?" Johnny said, I would say, darling, may I please be excused for a moment? I have to shake hands with a very dear friend of mine who I hope to introduce you to after dinner. A 90-year-old man goes for a physical and all of his tests come back normal. The doctor says, Larry, everything looks great. How are you doing mentally and emotionally? Are you at peace with God? Larry replies, God and I are tight. He knows I have poor eyesight, so he's fixed it. So when I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, poof, the light goes on. When I'm done, poof, the light goes off. Wow, that's incredible, the doctor says. A little later in the day, the doctor calls Larry's wife. Bonnie, he says, Larry is doing fine, but I had to call you because I'm in awe of his relationship with God. Is it true that he gets up during the night and poof, the light goes on in the bathroom, and when he's done, poof, the light goes off? Oh, sweet Jesus, exclaims Bonnie. He's peeing in the refrigerator again. 3 dinosaurs are running across the desert when they stumble upon a magic lamp. They rub it, and a genie appears. I have 3 wishes, so I'll give one to each of you, the genie announces. The first dinosaur thinks hard. All right, he says, I'll have a big, juicy piece of meat. Instantly, the biggest, juiciest piece of meat he'd ever seen appears in front of him. Not to be outdone, the second dinosaur thinks even harder. I know, I'll have a shower of meat. Immediately, huge pieces of meat rain down around him. The third dinosaur, certainly not to be outdone, thinks harder than the previous dinosaurs. I've got it, he cries. I want a meteor shower. By the time John pulled into the little town, every hotel room was taken. You've got to have a room somewhere, he pleaded. Or just a bed, I don't care where. Well, I do have a double room with 1 occupant, admitted the manager, and he might be glad to split the cost. But to tell you the truth, he snores so loudly that people in adjoining rooms have complained in the past. I'm not sure it'd be worth it to you. No problem, the tired traveler assured him. I'll take it. The next morning, John came down to breakfast bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. The manager was impressed. No problem with the other guy snoring, then? Nope, I shut him up in no time. How'd you manage that? He was already in bed snoring away. When I came in the room, John said, I went over, gave him a kiss on the cheek, and said, good night, beautiful, and he sat up all night watching me. During a national water shortage, a mother and daughter were sharing a shower. The daughter looks at her mother and then down at herself and says, What's that? Thinking quickly, the mother says, That's your garage, and you must never let a boy park his car in it. Next door, a father and his son were also sharing a shower. The son looks at his dad and then down at himself and says, What's that? The father looks down and smiles. That is your Ferrari, son, and you can park it in any garage you want. That evening, after school, the little girl comes home with blood all over her hands. Hey, mother sees this and screams, Oh my God, what happened? The boy next door tried to park his Ferrari in my garage, so I tore its back wheels off. One day, a young man, confused and directionless in life, was walking in a park. He sees a well-dressed and well-to-do old man sitting on a bench, feeding the birds and enjoying the scenery. He walks up to him and says, Sir, you seem to have done well for yourself in life. Do you mind telling me how you made your lot? The old man says, Sure. Have a seat, sonny. I remember I was just about your age without a dollar to my name, but one day I was walking in a park just like this, and I found a nickel on the ground. I grabbed that nickel and bought an apple with it. I sat down and polished that apple for the whole day. The next day I sold it for a dime. The next day I bought 2 apples. I polished those apples for the entire day, even harder than the day before. The next day I sold them for a dime each. The day after that I bought 3 apples and I polished those 3 apples for the entire day. The next day my uncle died and left me $1 million. I was leaving the Walmart on Main Street the other day, and as I walked to my car, 2 gorgeous 18-year-old girls approached me with a sob story about their car breaking down and needing a ride back to their place. Naturally, I couldn't turn them down. When I got them back to their place, they insisted on thanking me with a drink. I tried to decline, but they wouldn't budge. As soon as I got into their apartment, they were all over me. There was nothing I could do. There were two of them. Before I knew it, they had stripped me naked and were having their way with me. First, it was one of them, then the other, then both at the same time. When all was done, I got dressed and left. It wasn't until I got back home that I realized that while I was busy with one of them, the other had stolen my wallet. Anyway, this is just a heads up. Walmart has wallets for as little as $5. I've already been robbed 3 times this week. The turtle wanted to see an erotic movie once in his life, but the box office wouldn't let her in, so she sat down in front of the cinema and started crying. A young man walked by and asked the turtle what was wrong. She explained what had happened, and the man suggested that he could hide her in his pants if the turtle would buy him a ticket. He would then unzip his trousers at the cinema, and she could watch the erotic film. The turtle agreed. A young couple was sitting next to the two in the cinema. The girl kept looking at the young man, whereupon her boyfriend angrily asked what she was watching all the time. She replied, "Look, he has it outside." Her boyfriend said, "So what? What does it matter that he has it outside? I have it outside too." "Yes, I know, but yours doesn't eat popcorn." Airman Jones was assigned to the induction center where he briefed new recruits about their government benefits, especially GI insurance. Before long, Captain Smith noticed something unusual. Jones was selling insurance to almost every single recruit. Curious, the captain decided to observe one of his briefings. Jones started off explaining the basics of GI insurance, then dropped this gem. If you have GI insurance and go into battle and get killed, the government pays your family $200,000. If you don't have GI insurance and get killed, they only pay $6,000. Then, with a serious look, he asked, "Now, which group do you think they're going to send into battle first?" Let's just say he made a lot of sales that day. A guy walks into a bar with his pet monkey. He orders a drink, and while he's drinking it, the monkey is running wild. The monkey jumps up on the pool table and grabs the cue ball, sticks it in his mouth, and swallows it whole. The bartender is livid and says to the guy, "Did you see what your monkey just did?" "No. What did that stupid monkey do this time?" says the patron. "Well, he just swallowed the cue ball off the pool table whole," says the bartender. "Yeah, well, I hope it kills him because he's been driving me nuts," says the patron. The guy finishes his drink and leaves. 2 weeks later, he comes back with the monkey. He orders a drink, and the monkey starts running wild around the bar again. While the man is drinking his drink, the monkey finds some peanuts on the bar. He grabs one, sticks it up his butt, then pulls it out and eats it. The bartender is disgusted. "Did you see what your monkey did now?" he asks. "What now?" responds the patron. "Well, he stuck a peanut up his butt, then pulled it out and ate it," says the bartender. "Well, what do you expect?" replied the patron. "Ever since he ate that darn cue ball, he measures everything first." A man goes running into a clinic, shouting and screaming in pain. "Please, doctor, you've got to help me. I've been stung by a bee." The doctor says reassuringly, "Don't worry, I'll put some cream on it." "You'll never find that bee. It must be miles away by now." "No, you don't understand," answers the doctor. "I'll put some cream on the place you were stung." "Oh, it happened in the garden in back of my house." "No, no, no," says the doctor, getting frustrated. "I mean, where on your body did that bee sting you?" "On my finger," screamed the man in pain. "The bee stung me on my finger and it really hurts." "Which one?" the doctor asked. "How am I supposed to know? All bees look the same to me." There were 3 nurses in a morgue. They entered a room where they had discovered that there was a dead man laying on the bed with a heart-on. The first nurse was very forward and said, "Wow, I have never seen that before. I can't let that go to waste." After saying this, the first nurse sat and wrote it. The second nurse did the same. The third nurse explained that she couldn't, as she was on her period. After a bit of convincing, she eventually wrote it. After 3 minutes, the man woke up. The nurses said, "What the hell? You were dead a few minutes ago." The man replied, "Yeah, I was. But I feel great now that I have had 2 jump starts and a blood transfusion." A nun, really needing to go to the bathroom, walked into a neighborhood pub. The place was hopping with music and dancing, but every once in a while, the lights would turn off, Each time after the lights would go out, the place would erupt into cheers. However, when the revelers saw the nun, the room went dead silent. She walked up to the bartender and asked, "May I please use the restroom?" The bartender replied, "I really don't think you should." "Why not?" the nun asked. "Well, there is a statue of a naked man in there, and his most private part is covered only by a fig leaf." "Nonsense," said the nun. "I'll just look the other way." So the bartender showed the nun the door at the top of the stairs, and she proceeded to the restroom. After a few minutes, she came back out, and the whole place was hopping with music and dancing again. However, they did stop just long enough to give the nun a loud round of applause. She went to the bartender and said, "Sir, I don't understand. Why did they applaud for me just because I went to the restroom?" "Well, now they know you're one of us," said the bartender. "Would you like a drink?" "But I still don't understand," said the puzzled nun. "You see," laughed the bartender, "every time the fig leaf is lifted on the statue, the lights go out in the whole place. Now how about that drink, sister?" An old man lay awkwardly sprawled across 3 entire seats in the movie theater. When the usher came by and noticed this, he whispered to the old man, "Sorry, sir, but you're only allowed 1 seat." The old man didn't budge. The usher became more impatient. "Sir, if you don't get up from there, I'm going to have to call the manager." Once again, the old man just muttered and did nothing. The usher marched briskly back up the aisle and in a moment returned with the manager. Together, the two of them tried repeatedly to get the old disheveled man to respond, but with no success. Finally, they summoned the police. The officer surveyed the situation briefly, then asked, "All right, buddy, what's your name?" "Fred," the old man moaned. "Where are you from, Fred?" asked the police officer. With a terrible strain in his voice and without moving, Fred replied, "The balcony." 2 guys were taking chemistry at the University of Mississippi. They did pretty well on all of the quizzes and the midterms and labs, such that going into the final they had a solid A. These 2 friends were so confident going into the final that the weekend before finals week, even though the chemistry final was on Monday, they decided to go up to the University of Tennessee and party with some friends. They had a great time. However, with hangovers and everything, they overslept all day Sunday and didn't make it back to Mississippi until early Monday morning. Rather than taking the final then, they found their professor after the final to explain to him why they missed the final. They told him that they went up to the University of Tennessee for the weekend and had planned to come back in time to study, but that they had a flat tire on the way back and didn't have a spare and couldn't get help for a long time, so they were late in getting back to campus. The professor thought this over and told them they could make up the final on the following day. The 2 guys were elated and relieved. They studied that night and went in the next day for the final. The professor placed them in separate rooms and handed each of them a test booklet and told them to begin. They looked at the first problem, which was worth 5 points. It was something simple about molarity and solutions. Cool, they thought. This is going to be easy. They did that problem and then turned the page. A lady goes to the bar on a cruise ship and orders a scotch with 2 drops of water. As the bartender gives her the drink, she says, "I'm on this cruise to celebrate my 80th birthday, and it's today." The bartender says, "Well, since it's your birthday, I'll buy you a drink. In fact, this one is on me." As the woman finishes her drink, the woman to her right says, "I would like to buy you a drink, too." The old woman says, "Thank you. Bartender, I want a scotch with 2 drops of water." "Coming up," says the bartender. As she finishes that drink, the man to her left says, "I would like to buy you one, too." The old woman says, "Thank you. Bartender, I want another scotch with 2 drops of water." "Coming right up," the bartender says. As he gives her the drink, he says, "Ma'am, I'm dying of curiosity. Why the scotch with only 2 drops of water?" The old woman replies, "Sonny, when you're my age, you'll have learned how to hold your liquor. Holding your water, however, is a whole other issue." A man is in court. The judge says, "On the 3rd of August, you are accused of killing your wife by beating her to death with a hammer. How do you plead?" "Guilty," said the man in the dock. At this point, a man at the back of the court stood up and shouted, "You dirty rat!" The judge asked the man to sit down and to refrain from making any noise. The judge continued, "Hey, and also on the 17th of September, you are accused of killing your son by beating him to death with a hammer. How do you plead?" "Guilty," said the man in the dock. Again, the same man at the back stood up and shouted even louder, "You dirty, rotten, stinking rat!" At this point, the judge called the man to the bench and said, "I have already asked you to be quiet. If you continue with these outbursts, I will have to charge you with contempt of court. I can understand your feelings, but what relationship have you to this man?" He replied, "He is my next-door neighbor." The judge replied, "I can understand your feelings then, but you must refrain from any comments." The man replied, "No, Your Honor, you don't understand. Twice I have asked if I could borrow a hammer, and both times he said he didn't have one." A blind pilot walks into a plane waving his walking stick. The passengers all look at each other in disbelief. The flight attendant gets on the PA and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the captain is legally blind, but rest assured, he is one of the best pilots in the world with over 6,000 successful flights." Next, the co-pilot makes his way to the plane, and he is also blind and uses his walking stick to make it to the cabin. The flight attendant gets on the PA and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the co-pilot is also blind, but rest assured, he is the second best pilot in the world with over 5,000 successful flights." At this point, the plane begins to take off from the runway. As it gains speed, the passengers grow tenser. The plane keeps accelerating more and more, and as it approaches the end of the runway, it still hasn't left the ground. The plane is approaching the end of the runway at high speed, and the passengers scream, "Oh my God, we're all going to die!" Suddenly, the plane takes off and begins its ascent. The pilot turns to the co-pilot and says, "The day they stop screaming, we're screwed." They were not prepared, however, for what they saw on this page. It said 95 points. Which tire? As the man made his way to his seat at the World Cup final, he couldn't help but feel excited. But as he sat down by the pitch, he noticed the seat next to him was empty. "What a waste," he thought to himself. "Who would have a seat like this and not use it?" Curiosity getting the best of him, he leaned over to his neighbor and asked if someone would be sitting there. "No," the neighbor replied. "The seat is empty." The man couldn't believe it. "This is incredible," he exclaimed. "But seriously, who in their right mind would pass up the chance to watch the World Cup final from this seat?" That's when the neighbor dropped a bombshell. "Actually, the seat belongs to me. I was supposed to come with my wife, but she passed away. This is the first World Cup final we haven't been to together since we got married." The man's heart sank. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's terrible." But then he had an idea. "Couldn't you find someone else to take her seat? A friend, relative, or even a neighbor?" The neighbor shook his head. "No," he said. "They're all at the funeral." After a long stint in prison, Kathy managed to secure herself a job at a candy shop. She arrived on the first day wearing a proper yet practical dress. However, her first day was set to be retrieving candy at the front register. The first customer came, looked at the candy, and asked for licorice. This was on the top shelf, so Kathy had to climb up and down the ladder to get it. The second customer came, checked the candy shelf, and asked for peppermint. These were also on the top shelf, so Kathy had to climb up and down the ladder again. The following customers all also wanted the top shelf candy, forcing Kathy to spend all day going up and down the ladder. At the end of the day, Kathy went to the owner, George, to ask a question. "Hey, so may I ask, why is all the popular candy on the top shelf?" George looked her up and down. I don't think it's the candy. They, might have wanted to see your undergarments." "Huh. Well, joke's on them. I don't even wear panties." So there are these two rich old men who live next to each other. At the border of their land is a pool that conjoins the two luxurious estates. In this pool, each man has a pet dolphin. Every day, the two old men stand at the edge of the pool and argue about whose dolphin is the smartest. This has been going on for years. Then one day, the first neighbor says, "Let's settle this once and for all." So the two men begin to devise a test to determine which dolphin is the smartest. They spare no expense. There are obstacle courses, memory tests, decoding puzzles, and hoops to jump through, the whole 9 yards. As the day of the test comes closer, the first neighbor starts to get nervous. He thinks to himself, "What if my dolphin loses? I would be humiliated." So he decides to drug his neighbor's dolphin. The day of the test arrives, and of course the first neighbor wins with flying colors. He gloats about his victory for months, but after a while he begins to feel guilty. So he tells his neighbor, "Hey neighbor, I have to come clean. I cheated on the dolphin test. I drugged your dolphin. We don't really know whose dolphin is the smartest." His neighbor looks at him and says, "That really defeated the purpose." A young couple moved into a new neighborhood. The next morning, while they are eating breakfast, the young woman sees her neighbor hanging the wash outside. "That laundry is not very clean," she said. "She doesn't know how to wash correctly. Perhaps she needs better laundry soap." Her husband looked on but remained silent. Every time her neighbor would hang her wash to dry, the young woman would make the same comments. About 1 month later, the woman was surprised to see a nice, clean wash on the line and said to her husband, "Look, she has learned how to wash correctly. I wonder who taught her this." The husband said, "I got up early this morning and cleaned our windows." A man and his wife sat down to dinner one evening. "Ringling Brothers is coming to town this week," the wife said excitedly. "The poster says they have a dancing bear. I've always wanted to see one." "Maybe next year," the man replied. "Work's really hectic right now." The next night, before he could even sit down, she was at it again. "The neighbors went today, said the tightrope walkers did the hokey-pokey right on the wire. Can you believe that?" "I'd love to take you," the man said with a sigh. "But if I miss any work this week, my boss will blow a gasket." The following night, she was practically buzzing. "The paperboy saw it too. He said a dozen clowns popped out of this tiny car and did the can-can in frilly bloomers. He said it was the funniest thing he's ever seen." The man started to feel guilty, but deadlines were deadlines. The next evening, his wife sat at the table looking heartbroken. "My book club went yesterday. They said the lion tamer and the elephant girl did a waltz together. It sounded so beautiful. Tomorrow's the last day. Can't we please go?" The man thought long and hard. Finally, he decided work could wait. He called a friend and asked him to cover his shift the next day. That night, he and his wife went to bed excited for the show. The next morning, the boss noticed the man wasn't at work. He cornered the friend and asked where he was. The friend shrugged and said, "He's out with a bad case of 4 unseen circus dances." One dark night in Dublin, a fire broke out inside the local chemical plant. In the blink of an eye, it erupted into massive flames. The alarm was sounded, and fire departments from miles around rushed to the scene. The chemical company president ran up to the fireman in charge and urgently said, "All our secret formulas are locked in the vault in the center of the plant. They must be saved. I'll give £50,000 to the fire department that can bring them out intact." But the roaring flames kept the firemen at bay. As the fire raged on, more and more fire departments arrived. The president increased the reward to £100,000 for the department that could rescue the secret files, but still the firemen couldn't break through the inferno. Then from a distance, a lone siren was heard. A small, battered fire truck from the nearby rural volunteer fire brigade appeared, driven by a crew of elderly men, mostly over 65. To everyone's amazement, the old fire engine roared right past the sleek, modern trucks, straight into the heart of the blazing fire. The other firemen watched in awe as the old-timers jumped off the truck and fearlessly fought the flames from all sides. It was a display of bravery and effort that no one had ever witnessed before. In no time, the elderly brigade had extinguished the fire and saved the precious secret formulas. The grateful chemical company president, astonished by their heroism, increased the reward to £200,000 and went over to thank each of the brave volunteers personally. A local TV station caught the moment on film and asked the fire chief, "What will you do with all that money?" "Well," said Patty, the 70-year-old fire chief, "the first thing we're going to do is fix the brakes on that bloody fire truck." Two little boys stole a big bag of oranges from a neighbor. They decided to go to a quiet place to share the lot equally. One of them suggested the nearby cemetery. As they were jumping over the gate to enter the cemetery, 2 oranges fell out of the big bag, but they didn't bother to pick them up since they had enough in the bag. A few minutes later, a drunkard on his way from a bar passed near the cemetery gate and heard a voice saying, "One for me, one for you, one for me, one for you, one for me, one for you." He immediately sobered up and ran as fast as he could to a church nearby for the priest. "Father, please come with me. Come and witness God and Satan sharing corpses at the cemetery." They both ran back to the cemetery gate, and the voice continued. "One for me, one for you. One for me, one for you, one for me, one for you." Suddenly the voice stopped counting and said, "What about the 2 at the gate?"